So someone want to make a motion to amend the minutes from February? Someone want to second that?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And then also, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the previous meeting. Someone second that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, board member comments. Let's start with Mr. Moody. We'll go right this time. All right. Is Mr. Bonfils online?
He is not.
He is not. All right, he says no comments. Is Mr. Vega online? Okay,
No comments.
no comments. There we go. Mr. Buffington. Maybe I shouldn't have gone right. That's probably a problem. Mr. Yudd.
Thank you, Chair. Feeling very lonely down here at the end.
I
of
know, we might have to move you up there.
I may have to move. Just greetings to all my colleagues and to our staff. Thank you for all the hard work that you do. I think we got a lot on the agenda for tonight, and I don't want to get ahead of the chair, but I did ask for one item to come off a consent, so hopefully that will go quickly. I don't mean to delay things. Thank you.
I think we're gonna have time between now and in the hearing, so don't worry about it. Mr. Brent
Campbell.
Campbell.
Glad to be here. No comments from me.
Mr. Kelly.
Good afternoon, everyone. I heard this morning on the news that I guess the federal government is going to lift restrictions on the water restrictors we have on our sinks and our faucets and showers and so forth, so that higher flow. So it'll be interesting in the future. This won't happen overnight, but it'll be interesting in the future to see if that is an uptick in our water usage over time.
I was reading it in the Wall Street Journal, and the little phrase was "Make America's showers great again."
Yeah, right.
And I was just laughing. It was so funny, but.
But anyway, wish everyone a happy Easter and happy Passover. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. You gotta stop reading the news. Mr. Sultan.
You know, his comments, but other than that, I have no comment.
All right, this is good. This is brief. I'm just gonna quickly talk about how it's been 1 year, a little over a year since we transitioned to a new general manager.
Yeah.
And change is never easy. But I think in this case, it's gone about as well as at least as I expected. I think a lot has to do with Brian, humble and a collaborator. So I thank you for that. And then I also want to, give a shout out to senior staff, everyone who threw their hat in the ring to run for this position. It was a great, hearing everybody and learning what people's stories were and what their perspective was in the organization. So I appreciate that. And then I think, senior staff and staff has rallied together and made it a really good first year. So I wanted to throw that out there and acknowledge that fact. So thank everybody. With that, I will turn it over to our general manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate those kind words. It's definitely a team effort, and I thank all of our staff as well for the work that they do every day. A few comments for you today. Our annual hydrant flushing program began on March 24th and will continue for 12 to 15 weeks. This program allows us to clean the distribution system, confirm water quality, and verify the operability of each hydrant in our system. You can find messaging in an interactive map on our website. And I would like to thank our hardworking line maintenance department that carries out the annual flushing of our nearly 14,700 hydrants each year. You'll find at your seats the 2025-2029 brochure for the strategic plan, including our updated vision and refreshed mission statement. Relying on input from all of our staff and supporting the hard work of our strategic planning team, I'm confident we have captured what makes Loudoun Water an exceptional organization. Our vision reads, trusted leaders, excellent service, and sustainable water. Our mission is we provide high quality water services to protect public health and the environment. And our values are dedicated, collaborative, visionary, customer focused, and resilient. We are planning a deeper dive into the new strategic plan at our board retreat in May. April is National Safe Digging Month, so shout out to our utility protection team led by Leslie Plazio and Justin Scarlett, who ensure Loudoun Water utilizes best practices for excavation activities and who work daily to ensure that Loudoun Water's infrastructure is properly marked and protected from damage amidst the rapid development and construction throughout our system. We have several outreach events to celebrate Earth Day. On April 21st, we are joining with Sustainability Matters and helping Farmwell Middle School science classes with their wildflower meadow planting project. On April 22nd, we are participating in the Freddie Mac Earth Day Fair. And on April 27th, we are partnering with the Children's Science Center to host their Earth Day extravaganza at Loudon Water. And finally, on April 24th, we are hosting the very popular Bring Your Child to Work Day event here at Loudon Water. I'm pleased to announce that we went live with our SAP S/4HANA software upgrade on Tuesday, April 1st. This project was completed on time and on budget after an intensive 9-month implementation effort. We are working our way through typical post-go live issues as we transition to normal operations. This upgrade significantly extends the life of our SAP system. It provides improved functionality for several business areas, including HR, finance, and customer service, and it enables continued integration and innovation. I'd like to recognize the people and teams that made this project a success, including our project leadership, made up of Mike Beardsley, Laura Bowers, Mark Wanko, and Jack Jadrieff, our IT Business Solutions team, our project team members, contributors, and leaders from all across the organization, as well as our implementation partner, Deloitte. Thanks again for a very successful go live. One note for you is that we have been selected by the Loudoun County Environmental Commission as an Environmental Excellence Award winner for Reservoir Park. The award recognizes our sustainable and innovative park design and our environmental stewardship education programming. Loudon Water scored the highest among nominees in the government category. The Environmental Excellence Awards is a program implemented by the Commission as directed in its bylaws from the Board of Supervisors. The award is intended to recognize individuals, businesses, and organizations for their leadership on environmental issues. Judges evaluated nominees based on a variety of criteria, including environmental impact, innovation, and transferability. Will be recognized at the Board of Supervisors meeting on April 15th. Some stats through March, we have 2,044 ERCs with almost 1,500 of those being data centers. And a reminder on your upcoming meetings, your next Finance Committee meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, April 23rd at 8 a.m. and the CIP is scheduled to meet Thursday, April 24th at 8 a.m. Those are all of my comments.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Brian. Mr. Buffington, we missed you on the board member comments. Do you have anything that you'd like to add?
Sorry I'm late, and I'm happy to be here. And as always, thank you to our wonderful staff.
Thank you, Mr. Buffington. I'm going to make a motion to adopt, or excuse me, to amend the agenda. We're going to remove the item that was on consent and move it to the action agenda. So I'm going to make a motion to modify the agenda as spoken. Anyone second that? All those in favor? Okay. Adopted the amended agenda. Board committee actions, Mr. Sultan, CIP.
I was not at the last CIP meeting. I understood that Jim was going to give the report, but given the action you just took, I think there's no need to read the CIP report. It could be covered when we consider the item.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Kelly, Finance?
Well, since we are going to be going over the update of the 5-year plan, I'll be very brief and say, well, we'll skip it.
All right.
One thing I do want to correct in the minutes, and Brian already covered this, but the next meeting is on the 23rd, not the 26th. That's noted in the minutes.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
that's it.
All right. That was that's as fast as I've ever heard. No consent agenda, so we're on to the action items. We'll start with the approval of the study task order from Mr. Geldert.
Hi.
We go through it since
Okay.
we've been skipping over items.
All right.
Hate
we'll
to
go-
put you on the spot, but
I'll do a brief overview here. So we're looking for approval, or thank you for listening to me today. I'm Darren Geldert. I'm the planning manager here at Loudon Water. And we're looking for approval for a water system master plan. This is in line with our typical planning process that we go through on the water side, on the wastewater side, on the reclaim side. You recently approved a wastewater master plan, and this is going to basically parallel that, where we start with developing a firm growth projection and historical review kind of our demand. And we're going through that now, actually, through a separate task order. We will develop our model and recalibrate it, make sure that it really matches what our system is seeing today. And we're going to spread all those future demands in the model and look at a variety of scenarios to develop a future plan for how do we build out our system. Those will look at operational improvements for what we're, in order to be the most efficient that we can. And it will also look at just pure growth projects to add facilities. So the master plan, why we've done a number of smaller area plans. We've been focused a lot on the JLMA expansion, some other pieces, but we really need to step back and look at the whole system to make sure we know where are the constraints. Can we meet future demands? That's the base question, I guess. And then what's the most effective way to meet those demands and to really operate the system? With different sources and different storage and pump stations, we have a lot of options out there. So we try and think about that as we plan the system. Then we look for the proper scope and the proper triggers for when we need to actually make capital improvements. We don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but yet we want to make sure that we have the facilities in hand when we need them. And then we're also looking this time to take advantage of some of the improvements that have been out there in terms of presentations and tools to help better share that knowledge internally and with all of our stakeholders. So this really helps us do some good analysis to make the best decisions we can, and then also improve that communication process. If you look back since our last master plan, there's a lot of changes. The JLMA is one with the TPA. We also added service area in the Western Lands next to the airport, the Red Hill parcels there. Obviously, the county plan changed, so there's different growth policies. There's the data center growth, which is a huge uncertainty that's out there because of the variety of technologies that they use and the changes they keep making. And then we're also trying to take advantage of our internal work that we've done over the past 5-10 years to deploy automated metering infrastructure, which gives us a whole bunch more data, and then just continual improvements to our analysis and visualization of that data. So the specific scope of work is going to be going through kind of collecting, reviewing the existing data, making sure our team is fully up to date with how we're running the system now. We'll actually go out and do some calibration on the model, make sure that it represents our system. And then we really get into the bulk of the project, which is looking at our system under different scenarios, which includes things like the average day demand, the peak demands, the peak hour demands within that, how things work over time, not just a steady state snapshot, but over 3 days, how do our tanks react? How does everything happen? And then as we add growth or add demand in our system, we'll look for those weak points or where there's potential issues with critical facilities and think, how can we improve that? Maybe that's more transmission, maybe that's more storage, maybe that's balancing our supply sources differently. And all that will lead to a capital improvement plan for the water system that we'll share through a report and various digital tools and models that we can reference in the future. So we're kind of here in this Q2 where we're hoping to kick off the master plan. We have already, and we continually kind of work on model updates as the system changes. We've done that annually where we're adding pipes to the system. And then we're also kind of in the midst of doing some projections and flows work. It's actually being carried in the wastewater master plan, but water and wastewater are very interconnected, so it works for this too. The goal is to get this project essentially more or less done by this time next year, or hopefully in the late spring, early summer, so we can roll that into our CIP the next fall. The budget is kind of broken out like this. You can see the bulk of the budget, again, is in that building the scenarios, doing the capacity analysis, and then looking at the alternatives. Those model runs take a lot of documentation and time to make sure that we have all the right boundary conditions. Our system has a lot of options, which is great for resiliency, but also provides lots of options to then try and model and mimic in the system. And this one is a project that we've planned on and budgeted for. The budget basically falls within our range there. And with that, I'd gladly take any questions.
Yes, I had a question about, saw the alternatives analysis listed there.
Mhm.
And it sounds like you're doing it based on, is it like a really formal where you're identifying the evaluation criteria and then weighting them? Or just if you could tell me a little bit more about how you're performing those alternatives analysis.
Yeah, so the alternatives analysis, it kind of starts with just what do we think we need to meet growth and what kind of options are there? Perhaps it's a new pipeline in the north or a new pipeline in the south that both could head to the east or head to the west. So there's always different alignments and alternatives that we could do. Eventually then, after we figure out kind of operationally what are some good, we have, I think, 3 major kind of ways of looking at the system. We'll say, okay, which of these 3 seems to make the most sense in terms of phasing, in terms of cost, in terms of development that we know is going on? How can we take advantage of that? So it's an iterative process. Eventually, yes, we're kind of scoring or looking at what are the best options. It's also, most of this is out in the future. So as these development comes, then we continually revisit it to make sure we're hitting the right projects at the right time.
So it sounds like you're determining the evaluation criteria, then applying them across the various scenarios. Are you also weighting certain criteria, having higher weights than others? Just
I mean, trying to think how to say it. I mean, as we evaluate the system, we're looking for a few things. Usually it's straight up hydraulic capacity. Can we maintain flows and pressures that we need? So that's fire flow, and that's just service pressure. If we have those things to meet the growth, then generally we can meet all of our other criteria. The other thing we watch out for, though, is looking at isolated mains that are not well looped. If you start having too many dead ends in your system, you'll have potential water quality issues. So it's an integrated pieces. It's largely hydraulic capacity dealing with growth still in our system. Secondary, it becomes more of a water quality or an energy concern where we're looking at long-term, what's the best way to operate it.
thank you.
Mr. Yudd?
Thank you. And thank you, Darren, for
Yep.
your work. Appreciate it. Question, I think I asked this, I was online for the CIP committee meeting. This does not include this only includes the central service area.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, thank you. That was my question,
Okay.
Chair. And then I wanted to be able to speak to this work and just ask my colleagues for maybe an extra level of scrutiny on this, because really this is how all of this is rolled forward. There was a discussion at the CIP committee, and this action rolls up to the board meeting as a consent agenda item. There was a discussion in February about the wastewater system master planning, and that rolled up as a consent item to the March meeting. That was approved. So you have direction to go forward. I was not present for that particular vote at that particular moment. My concern is that 2 pieces have come to the board for action. In total, with the 5% contingency, it's over $1 million of cost for master planning for just the suburban service area, for just the central service area. And I do think that the portions of it that will deal with growth and sort of triangulate to get to a better projection of growth is desperately needed. And we're going to have a little bit of that conversation in the 5-year plan of finance when we talk about our exposure and our future costs that we may encounter. I feel that $1 million for master planning is an awful lot of money. When you look at our capital projects, we talk about millions of dollars for capital projects. This is planning. And to break it apart in the manner in which it was broken apart, one was a $483,000 cost for wastewater. This one's 531. Why they wouldn't come together is a question. But they didn't. And I think the net impact to me as a board member is that's a lot of money for study, for master planning. Not saying it's not needed, it is needed. Not saying the components of it aren't needed, they are critically needed, and they relate to so many other things. The so many other things relate to all of these things on this document here today. So I would just urge my colleagues to perhaps give it a second thought. I will be voting no when you call for the vote because I think it's a lot of money for master planning. And I also think that maybe we should see the scope of it, of the studies. And I know that the board already directed the work on the wastewater portion. I don't want to, I don't want to say to Brian, how come they came in two separate pieces? I'm sure there's a reason for it. But for that reason, I asked for this to come off consent. And for the reasons I expressed, I would like the opportunity to vote no.
Yeah, just want to, Mr. Yetter, you suggesting that they should have been done concurrently, basically, or in conjunction with one another?
Logically, the amount, the water that is purveyed by our organization to customers every day, every minute of every day, has a relationship to the amount of sewage that's generated that we have to treat every day. So I do think there's obviously a nexus between the two, and master planning for both of them would be underway in these two different components. Why they didn't come as one, and are there efficiencies and savings to consolidate the master planning? I would think they are, but for $1 million, I think we're owed a little bit more. And no, absolutely, Darren, don't feel like there's anything to say the staff has not performed adequately. It's been explained excellently in two different pieces. So,
I mean, for me, I'm not an engineer, but they would seem like they're two separate systems. So,
They're two separate engineering
Yeah.
programs.
so I don't know why they would necessarily be efficiencies to combine them. Someone staff could speak to that question, but off the top of my head,
firm is doing both studies. So could there be efficiencies in directing that one firm to do the both studies, knowing that they are two separate systems? Yes, they are. That's part of the question I had.
Mr. Vega.
I do have one recollection from our previous discussion is that there will be a third study for the reclaimed water system master plan. So we're talking about 3 master plan efforts that may or may not potentially go to the same consultant, and whether there are efficiencies is something that's a valid question, very valid question. So from my fellow board member.
When was the last time we did a master plan? I can't recall. And do we know what the fees were then?
So the last water master plan was published in 2018.
Okay.
And the fees on that were, don't know for sure, I think 420,000 roughly,
For all of them or for each?
just for water.
Okay.
We did a wastewater master plan in 2016, I think. And I don't remember the fees offhand. Do you know, Tom?
I'd say it was probably around $400,000.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll just, I know it's one other system. We did ask a couple other systems that have done a combined master plan. They found it a little bit challenging to manage that at that time because of the way, I don't know, their consultant approached it. I think maybe we could do it better, but they had real issues with trying to keep everyone involved and going to kind of having one team run all of those meetings. They tended to get really long. I don't know, that pushed us away from it a little bit. And frankly, I think we originally thought the water master plan would be a bit later than the wastewater master plan, but the needs have pushed us forward. But yes, We also have talked with them, and I think there will be actually some efficiencies in the planning of it because we have the same engineering company working with us. There's slightly different staff on the two different projects, but some of overlap. So I do think we will see some of those efficiencies, even though you're right, it's a big fee.
Okay. All right, well, let's,
I had a question real quick, Mr. Chairman. Since we have these finance committees and CIP committees, what was the CIP committee's recommendation? I understand Mr. Yudd wasn't present for that particular one, so he wasn't as involved. But for those that did attend that meeting, did the CIP recommend that we approve this, or was there some concern, or where?
no, it was on consent,
Okay,
so.
yeah, I was just confirming that, but, okay, so, great, that's helpful. One question, Darren. I noticed we had urban policy area here, and I was involved in some county, maybe it was EDA or EDC or something, but, you know, Moorfield, which is basically all of the urban policy, is zoned and vested and approved.
Right.
And then you have this policy area, this new urban policy area, which has all these different parameters and rules and things. So I only mention that because that then creates the question, which are we consulting as we're projecting out demand growth and things like this? So I don't know if you have a thought or an opinion, or if anybody's considered that yet. Mr.
That was a
Vega.
question that was asked at the.
Oh, it was. Oh, good, good.
I mean, essentially, we do lean on the county's projections, and the county has, to some degree, in their updates at the TAS level, at the smaller planning area level, incorporated increased projections based on known development and what they think is potential there. Trying to predict the amount of kind of redevelopment or changes to that is always tricky. We don't tend to assume everything's going to build out to its maximum possible potential. It doesn't usually happen that way.
Sure.
So we lean on known projections, and then make our best estimate of how we work on that. I'll say in our systems, both on the water and the wastewater system, we tend to build in a little bit of resiliency or extra capacity because the model may kind of indicate, you know, a 14-inch pipe is the right size. Well, we don't install 14-inch pipes. We install 16 or 24-inch. And so there's always a little bit of rounding up, and that extra capacity has served us really well.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so what I'm hearing is that we're using the county's numbers, which are assuming a greater density than what's actually currently proffered and approved. And that's okay, because in our business, we have to err on the side of being too conservative. And so I'm comfortable with that. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions? Okay, well, would someone read the recommended motion?
Master plan. 530,700. I continue to go by the gentleman. Total authorized budget, 558,000. Additional costs will require board approval.
Second,
I'll second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Yeah.
Noted. Thank you. 5-year plan of finance, update by Courtney Rogers of Davenport.
Good afternoon. I'd like to introduce Courtney Rogers and Stephen Geis. Courtney's back. They're both from Davenport, and we're going to go through an abbreviated version of what the Finance Committee saw.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the board. Great to see you all again. You all know my partner, David Rose, and I have had the great fortune of working with the authority here going back over 30 years. And so it's here we are again. It's, you know, the growth is still here. It's this is a great segue after talking about the master plan, because the master plan rolls right into the annual plan that we update. So the first question on the first page is, what is the 5-year plan of finance? And really what it does is it incorporates the projected operating revenues and expenditures. Now, we have the good fortune of having the rate study that was done last fall So we actually have used, rather than really tinker with it since it's so close, this go around, we actually used their revenues and expenditures moving forward. We also take into consideration availability charge revenues and customer growth projections. Which we'll talk about a little bit more in a little bit. And then incorporates the cost estimates of the capital projects. That's the one thing we'll see that has changed quite a bit since last year's update around this time. So ultimately, that all goes into the model and gives us a sense of where our cash balances might end up under different scenarios. And then also, do we need any future borrowing? And so we'll cover that as we go through the summary here. So they all fit together, of course. With the master plan, as you heard, you get the CIP. So that CIP is incorporated along with the operating budget, as well as projected user rates, current rates, as well as projected rates and availability charges all go into the plan of finance, and to make sure that we've got the funding needed for both the operating side, but also capital as your projects are moving along. So the considerations for this year in the fall, of course, Stantec had their 3-year rate study that was adopted. The rate increases adopted, of course, in December. So as I mentioned, we've taken those projections and put them into the model. The CIP, which covers the 5-year period going out through 2029, has increased roughly $200 million from what was presented this time last year. And that's really the biggest change as you incorporate some of the projects coming forward. Growth estimates remain conservative. As Vice Chairman Campbell just mentioned, we are always conservative in our estimates, and they are in line with the county, most recent county projections. We'll show some graphics on that in just a moment. The increases on the capital side are really primarily due to cost estimates, increases on the DC water improvements, Broad Run Phase 3, Milestone Reservoir, and some of the JLMA expansion. And so engineering has looked at and reviewed the CIP, and of course, those are mission critical projects that are included here. Those key projects are listed and will continue moving forward. And there is the ability, if needed, to shift some of the smaller projects, but as we know, those are not going to move the needle too much. So the other thing that with this increase of the additional increases in the CIP versus last year, we've gone from roughly 1 issuance of debt to now 3. One thing that I'll note that is different from the rate study, the rate study actually had 4 different bond issues, essentially the same amount, but spread out over 4 years, starting in 26. The one thing we've been able to do, and part of that is with the increase of the connection fees that came in last year were a lot higher than what they saw when they were doing the model. We were able to push one of the issues out and into 27 and just make the issues a little bit bigger in those 3 years, but they still have roughly the same amount. So it's just more of a timing issue. Just as a note, just want to make sure everybody realizes that as part of the modeling, user rates are covering 100% of interest expense on the debt and 30% of the principal. The balance, of course, comes from the connection availability fees as they come in. So part of what the model is really looking at is the cash levels as well as coverage, but we really want to make sure our cash levels stay within our policies. That's something that served us well over working with the rating agencies and keeping our ratings at the AAA, the highest level possible. One of the things that the rating agencies has told us over the past several years is that they wanted to be cautious about our reliance on availability charges. So one of the things we did back in 2018 is we introduced a new policy to make sure that by not counting availability charges, that our coverage met at least a one-time going forward. We're well in excess of that, so things are in great shape there. And then, of course, our typical coverage, which does include availability charges, the policy is to stay above a 1.5 planning rate, and we're well above that as well. So historically, what's tended to happen is while we project and run the model trying to get down to the lower limit, because we've been conservative with our estimates, our connection fees and availability charges have typically come in much higher. You can see that historically we've been above not only the lower, but above our upper limit. You can see how 24 has jumped even further, and part of that has to do, of course, with the data center world. On the coverage side, this page summarizes both the policies we just covered, which would be the including availability charges of 1.5, and then also the not including on the right-hand side of at least including a coverage of 1 times. You can see that the goal target on both sides, we're well in excess of that and continue to be in great shape there. So as we move toward projections on the revenue and expense assumptions, again, we've incorporated the modeling from the rate study. We incorporated the increases the board took in, adopted back in December of 24, and then the projected from the model of 4% going out beyond where you adopted in 28 and 29 at 4%. When you look at the ERCs, that's probably one of the key drivers here. You can see on the chart in the bottom left corner, dark green is historical. The light green is the model projections. You look at 22 and 23, you can kind of see how starting in 2019, things started trending downward. Of course, we had a blip in 24. Some of that, as I understand, was some of the catch up from some of the data centers that came back and said we're using more than we anticipated. And so you had a little bit of a catch up that year. But we're projecting, based on what we've been seeing with the county figures, as well as what you saw in 22 and 23, more in the line of 2,000 new customers. So that's what the model is based on. Mentioned the capital funding. When you look back at last year in the dark green versus this year in the light green, you'll see about a $25 million increase in 25. 26 is basically the same, but we're seeing some big increases in the outer years in 27, 28 to the tune of about a little over 25 million, 50 million each in each year. And that's what's driving that $200 million increase. So in order to stay within our policy cash levels, we're projecting bond issues there in 2027, 28, and 29. Now, in the past, as our conservative estimates, if reality, they come in a lot higher, what will happen is that first bond issue will end up sliding or being reduced altogether. And so we've already seen that since the rate model, that was the rate study that was done last year. We've already slid 1 year. Because what we do, of course, is project down to try to get down to our lower limit based on those lower availability charges, connection numbers that basically will take us down around that 200% 2 times level when it comes to our projected cash balances. So with that, Mr. Chairman, that is our summary. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that presentation. It was a great presentation during the Finance Committee meeting and obviously similar to this one. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask?
I did. I could
Mr.
be
Vega.
educated, and if you've educated me before, re-educated as to what outside funding means.
It's made up of a couple things. First one being grants. We have a FEMA grant that's helping pay for Milestone Reservoir. Also, it includes, and Darren or Tom can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it includes its reimbursement from the county for projects that we're performing on their behalf is included in outside funding.
Mr. Vega, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? Keep in mind, this is we get a mid-year update for every year for the 5-year plan of finance. It moves. It's a living, breathing plan, so to speak. One thing I asked Brian in our pre-meeting was, how much debt have we retired in the past 10 years? And Brian estimated to be about 100 million. So between 2015 and today, we've retired 100 million. So that makes me feel a little bit better about having to issue, possibly 200 million in the next 4 or 5 years. This is, obviously critical projects that we have to perform, and we have to, we don't have much of a choice. I think going forward, we need to stay vigilant on these large capitally intensive projects. And that heavy lift is going to fall on engineering to make sure that we're managing these expenses appropriately. So I think that's a key thing going forward. And then as Courtney said, as long as we continue to have decent revenue from the availability fees, we could probably push the borrowing out maybe another year, so it might not be to 27, 28. And that's happened consistently every year that we've done the 5-year plan of financing. I think finally it's going to catch up to us, but like I said, these are necessary changes. So does anybody else have anything that they want to add?
I had a quick question. We had kind of dabbled around and we were looking at like this 100-year plan that we've kind of been building slowly. Where are we at that? Is that just sort of on a shelf somewhere that we're sort of working on, or is that, what are we doing with that?
I don't want to put Jessica on the spot.
Yeah, great. So we do have sort of a completed 100-year plan of sorts. Again, understanding we're projecting a century out. So, you're really on thin ice when you're going that far out, but it's something which is better than nothing. So, yeah, okay. Yeah, that might be interesting I don't know, have we ever presented that to the board?
Yes,
Yeah.
we,
Okay.
every August, we do an asset management update, and a couple of years ago, I believe we walked through that, but we can certainly
Okay. Yeah, great.
add that.
Oh, great. Yeah, it's good, like the 5-year window, but the 5 years is relatively short in the big scheme. And you're going, we just don't want to run out of money 50 years from now. So, okay, great. Thank you.
No, if I could, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, that's actually a great point, because I think we talked a little bit about that at the Finance Committee, and that is not many of our clients think about funding depreciation. They tend to see it. It's kind of a non-cash item. But what depreciation really is down the road, when your growth slows down and you don't have those new availability charges to put back into the system, guess where you have to go to find funds to actually replace those pipes? You borrow for it. And so you look at a system, not trying to, I live in Richmond. Richmond's an older system, not trying to beat them up. But guess what? They don't have the same connection fees that you guys have, availability charges. And so they actually have to go and borrow in order to replace old pipes. And so that, of course, they have a very debt heavy load. So that's something to think about. And I think that's a great point to be looking ahead and beyond, obviously, for 5 years. At some point, we'll see that decline in growth. And so to be prepared for that is probably a smart idea.
And I know you guys look at systems all across the country, but is there any older system that's 100 years old, for instance, that hasn't found itself in the situation of having to heavily borrow to repair and replace its system? It seems like every single utility ends up going, oh man, we're out of money and we've got $30 million of repairs, $50 million of repairs, and it's this really difficult situation.
I don't know of any. I can think of Alexander Sanitation's a good example of an older system that got a lot of help from the state when they had to do their combined sewage overflow programs. I don't know as much about DC, but I'm sure DC's had the same issues. Richmond's that way. I know Atlanta's got a big number with their CSO problems and things like that. But it's, if you think back to a lot of the older systems were funded through the federal government. And so their initial plants were built with federal money. Not even like obviously when you've built your plants, you had to come out with your own pocket, or you had to go to the bond market and get it. But if you look at some of the older systems, they were basically given the money, but didn't put money aside, and now are having to borrow to actually replace old pipes and old plants.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Well, it'd be great if Loud Water could be a pioneer in that regard and go, hey, we're a relatively young system, so the verdict's still out, but maybe none of us will be around to see the verdict, but.
Yeah, you guys do a great job of planning. And so I felt like that was something I wanted to at least throw it out there from an experience. And
No, thank you. Thank you. Well, great job. Thank you.
All right, someone want to read the recommended motion? Mr.
Can
Campbell?
I raise one
Sure,
point, Chair?
sure.
You reminded me when you were talking about retirement of debt, that we had a really good chart that was presented during Finance Committee about the cumulative impact of debt over several years as you're waiting for debt to be retired. And I didn't see it in today's presentation, but I would say it was super helpful. And it was in that Finance Committee packet, so people could look at it and get the idea. There is pressure from that cumulative debt over those years, depending on the time and sequencing of issuance. And as we also spoke about in Finance Committee, the need for maybe better or tighter projections on what's happening with the ERC phenomenal rate of growth, and what does that mean for the future, and what does that mean for, for our projects, I think should be reinforced. And so anyway, I just want to make that point. I'll be glad to make the motion if you're okay with that.
Sure. Couple of comments, just
Sure.
before we make the motion, Charles. One of the rating agencies still says, with his reliance on availability charges, they still haven't gotten off of that. The other two have removed that concern. But as a finance guy, two things that give me a lot of comfort, and it's very conservative, and I think it serves us well, is the debt service coverage policy, and the other policy that we have. Let's see, that was the debt service over here with the cash balance, minimum cash balance policy. So I think we're well within those two financial covenants, plenty of cushion, and I think the rating agencies, if I recall, that's something that they like as well. That we're managing our expenditures and our cash extremely well, and pretty tight covenants because they're very conservatively set. So I think that's something that people should consider as well.
Okay, I move the board endorse the 5-year plan of finance, 2025 to 2029 as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. That was, thank you for Davenport.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
Always
thank you.
appreciate. No new business, no new information items, monthly reports, financial summary monthly from Sally Deller.
So we're looking good. Revenues are exceeding our budget by 21.6 million operating revenues. Non-operating revenues are ahead of forecast. That's due to the availability fees from 2024 that rolled into 2025. We move down to expenses. Expenses are looking good too. This one category here is just timing for our purchased wastewater. So that will catch up next month. But all the rest of them are under forecast. This is our ERC chart. I can't wait to redo this at the mid-year forecast. So the actual, if I take out those December, we'd still be above this line, but we'd be like right about there. So I'll redo that at mid-year. There's our monthly numbers. And then here's breaking out the availability charges for you and the dollar amount. Most of it data centers so far. As for our capital spending plan through February, we have spent, I'm looking up there, 10 million. So we're at 86% of our forecast. And then this is just the percentage by month and cumulative compared to budget. Happy to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions? All right, that looks good. Thank you. Thank you, Sally. Legislative update by Michael View.
Good afternoon. As Micah makes his way up, he's going to have a few comments. I just want to make a few comments to start this. So, we've historically, we have really a team of people who track the legislative activities each year through different channels, and Micah is kind of our central coordinator and helps really keep track of that. And historically, we've come to the board every April at the end of the session and provided a summary. And last year that we had some discussion and we heard you and there was some desire to hear the status and tracking of all this a little bit more along the way than just at the summary end of it. And so we tweaked that. And as you've seen, starting in January, we created a new monthly report format, provided a tracking document, and then have each monthly board meeting just provided a couple of the highlights. So hopefully that's helped. We're happy to hear any feedback. We'll plan to do that again as long as that worked well. So after today's summary, it won't show up as a monthly report probably until we get back into that next January. So that's the plan moving forward. Micah's just going to walk through a couple of the final highlights, and then we're happy to take questions.
Thank
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Board. I appreciate this opportunity to provide the final update. We're really just bringing to the highlight these three final items. We knew that we had, I think we had shared in the last update that Loudon Water participated in a coalition making recommendations to the governor on the treatment of House Bill 2482. We had asked for some specific amendments, and then failing that, we suggested that a veto may be appropriated. The governor aligned with that, not just with the voice of our coalition, but with others. The governor's recommendation and rationale for the veto is online, but it really cuts to sort of basic political philosophy that there's no guarantee that this apprenticeship requirement contract will ultimately create jobs, but there's a very strong guarantee that it will raise prices for public projects. And that was the justification for vetoing that piece of legislation. And somewhat of a surprise, we did discover that the governor had vetoed Senate Bill 1319. And again, it's a veto in line with the standing political philosophy that we already have legislation in place from the previous General Assembly to manage PFAS discharges and control them in the state. We were doing that through the drinking water side. Through the previous General Assembly, this bill would have sort of duplicated that effort through the wastewater collection side. And so that bill was vetoed. Finally, the governor made recommendations back to the House for amendments to House Bill 2050. That's the PFAS bill that is really only focused on the Occoquan Reservoir and really only focused on one primary discharger in that area, semiconductor production facility. The recommendations were to essentially extend the compliance timeline for that discharger to run in parallel with the compliance deadline for the water purveyor. And this is a really good but simple, straightforward amendment that ensures that the polluter is going to remain in a position to pay and to control these discharges as opposed to the general ratepayer base for that water purveyor. And so we care about that. I think as Alton had mentioned before, a portion of our service area drains through Fairfax County and into UOSA, and we would have had to pick up a portion of ultimately about $400 million of upgrades to that plant. So this amendment, I think, is beneficial for that service area and for maintaining those sort of stakeholder arrangements where the polluter takes responsibility for the impact to the water body. And
Mike, I'm sorry, who's the polluter? I didn't catch that part. Who's the discharger we're talking about?
It's really Micron is the
Micron.
is the discharger. They're in, their semiconductor production facility in Manassas. At one point, they were the world's fourth largest. They have made substantial investments in Manassas and in the expansion and production of that facility. I think that they have a good, strong working relationship with UOSA, Fairfax County, and Fairfax Water. And so this legislation provides for the stability in that relationship moving forward.
Does anybody have any questions?
Do we get any of our drinking water? I know we buy some from Fairfax. Does any of that come out of the Occoquan?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
That is the Griffith.
All of our.
All of ours comes from Corvallis from
Okay.
the north.
From the Potomac.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Micah.
Thank you.
Water Resource Management Report. Jessica Edwards Brandt.
Hi, since Elton is out today, I'm going to give the introductory comments for this one and just let the board know that in May, we will be coming out with a new version of the Water Resources Board report for you all. So we're going to take it from a Word document format to a PowerPoint format. We think it's going to be easier to present the information that we need to bring forward. We'll be splitting it into two. So you will have a central system report and a community systems groundwater report. And we'll walk you through the report in more detail at the May meeting. And then after that, it will turn more into the shorter report style, even though it looks like a PowerPoint to just give you updates on. So we just wanted to let you know that that was coming, because when you get your next packet, it will look different.
I'm excited.
I have a question about Raspberry Falls, Selma.
We just wanted to bring attention to pages 1 and 3 in the report. You'll notice that the overall groundwater status as well as the Raspberry Selma status is now in caution. Directly related to the long-term drought we've been witnessing, we have not had the seasonal recharge we expect. So that system's resting groundwater level has been lower than expected compared to years past. So as a cautionary process, we decided to move it into caution such that we're able to get our messaging out in front and maybe try to dampen usage just a little bit. So in response to that, we have kind of implemented signage in the community to kind of align with their best practices, even odd water schedules, kind of just be mindful of what you use.
How, can you elaborate more on the level of water, like on a percentage basis?
Not percentage based, I can do inches roughly. A couple of our monitoring wells are about a foot off from where they were a couple of years ago this time. So, days like this help. We need a little bit more. And we're still early in the season. If we get some late spring precipitation, we may be okay.
Well, especially with the geology there, the water should actually get down quicker than it would in other places, right?
Correct. Our limestone's a little more reactionary than the rest of them. So it's the first to
That's
kind of
good
dry
and
out.
bad, but
Yep.
okay. All right, well, keep us posted on that.
Will do.
That could be, and I know, Leesburg was contemplating potentially running a pipe up there, 7, 8 years ago, so it's gonna be great.
I had a question, Chair.
Sure.
It might go back to what you were saying about the new format, but when you look at the portion of the report we get every month regarding the Virginia Drought Monitoring Task Force status map, if we've talked about it as a group several times, you look at the groundwater indicator, this month's report has emergency. Going back a few months, I went and looked today at some of our older reports, month prior warning, before that emergency, before that emergency, before that watch, emergency. And those, I think, are the DEQ monitoring wells, and they're getting that data from a couple, not many locations in the area. But we get the information every month and we look at it and we're like, well, we have one community system reported today now with slow well recharge. We have these consistent reports, albeit the monitoring wells that DEQ has. But we have so many different straws in the ground in that area. And we do have a responsibility because we do operate the community systems. And I do think that it's come up in other meetings where we've raised concern that we will be asked and called upon to provide more services. But I don't know that we really have all the planning that we do in other service areas, for example. And I don't know that we're totally ready for that. So I just would like to go back to the question about the format of the report. How does it help us in the decision-making process with the information that we'll be seeing?
Right. By splitting the community systems out into its own report, we're actually going to break into each community, give you information on our operating wells online. We're going to show historic usage we've pulled out so you can see the communities actually have done a good job pulling down use, and that is enabling us to make it through some of these droughts. So you will see breakouts on each community. We also plan to give you a little more information in that report as to what we're seeing that's making it yellow or green, helping you interpret the data a little more. So I do hope that that's going to bring in some of the clarity that you're looking for. And we do want the report to be a little more of a living document. So you'll even see in it that we're holding some places for like Milestone Reservoir so that we can add to it over time. And I do think as the drought progresses, we will need to add more information because we start looking at a lot of other things like Goose Creek level actually tells us a lot as to what's going on in groundwater in our area, maybe even a little better than, DEQ state maps. So we can bring some stuff in as the warm season comes on to help as the decisions become a little more difficult is our goal.
Yeah, no, I think it's good to hear, and the more information we have, the better. But our long-range planning will be triggered at some point, and I think whatever we can do to be mindful of that, would be the right thing to do. And what I feel, to not state it in the negative, but I don't know that we have enough of that conversation to set us up well for the future.
And we discussed today an agenda item at the board retreat to kind of dig into the exact subject. And I know it's important to Mr. Buffington and all other board members too. So I think that's something we're gonna at least start the process and discussions during that meeting. So. And then I don't know why, to be frank, why we even have this this map to me is, I only care about this region up here. I'd rather have more detail, which it sounds like we're gonna get on the Northern Virginia, it doesn't do anything for me looking at the rest of the state.
Conversations we had about keeping that map or leaving it, but we do want the board to have a statewide perspective and then bring it into a local perspective. So I think we have,
I know.
towards
They just
leaving
look
it
like
in.
Rubik's cubes from
But what we have done is tried to give you in the title of each page, the perspective we're wanting you to take on it, because some of that can get confusing even on how our reservoirs connect together, right? What you're looking for in that graph will hopefully be illustrated a little bit.
So when you look at that map now, Kendra, and you see the Northern Virginia area, there is a red. What is that? What specifically, do you know what the region is where the red is? Am I reading that correctly? I don't even know if I'm reading it correctly. Am I? Somebody help me out.
Yeah, so I think the red that you see the four boxes within the one box.
Yeah, there's one red box in the upper right hand.
Yeah, that's not related to like the area or the location. It's really, the red is showing that groundwater is an emergency. I think that's your
Where?
question.
In
In that Paragon that's yellow.
But also in that, there's green and yellow.
Yes.
All the
So
colors are there.
green is for reservoir storage, which
Okay.
doesn't apply to us. Yellow is for flow, which is, I think, based only on the Shenandoah River, doesn't necessarily apply to us. And then the top left quadrant, which is, I think, an orange, is precipitation.
Now it's only been 10,
Sorry.
it's only been 10
This whole
years.
time, you didn't know.
And I finally realized that. All right. Well, I look forward to the new reports. Thank you. Water and sewer agreements from Mr. Tran. I won't say the name of this report because I'm being repetitive.
Good afternoon, board. For last month, nothing out of ordinary for the vacations and easements. For developer agreements, we had a few projects that had a few small reimbursements as part of the agreements. And then we had a few license agreements that we signed. So nothing particular to note other than those.
What about the fences? Do we make them relocate the fences when they are within our easement?
No, so these are usually like fences that cross our easement. And so there is, we have a license agreement that basically says that, if we were to need to remove the fence for maintenance, then we have the ability to do so, but we don't have the responsibility to replace it.
Okay. I don't know if I've ever seen that before.
Mr. Chair, I do have a couple of questions. And mainly related to the three that are the Belmont Park. If I remember correctly, that's on Russell Branch Parkway and east of Belmont Country Club.
That's correct.
And what is the benefit to us by them upsizing from 8 to 12? Is that a line that runs along Russell Branch, or is that a line that runs within the community?
Yeah, so we have a 12-inch that runs up Russell Branch Parkway, and they only need an 8-inch for their development. And so we wanted a 12-inch to continue on once Russell Branch Parkway gets extended all the way to Belmont Ridge Road. And so for a continuation of supply, we want a 12-inch when they only needed an 8-inch. So.
And on the one where we're removing the reimbursement from the project, just curious, I don't recall seeing that very often.
Yeah, so that was a Heartland project where
the reimbursement got moved to another project. And so it was just phasing that got relocated.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you, Mr. Tran. All right, there's no closed session, so with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting. Correct?
Correct.
Someone want to make the motion?
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, at 5 o'clock, we'll have the public hearing, so you have recess for 20 minutes.